Chapter 5. Nick Garachi heard footsteps coming from across the darkness of the abandoned casino. A heavy limping man in squeaky shoes. "Sorry to hear about your ma, kid," a voice called. Garachi stood. It was Laughing Sal Narducci, Forlenza's ancient consigliere, dressed in a mohair sweater with diamond-shaped panels. When Garachi was growing up, Narducci was one of those guys you saw sitting out in front of the Italian-American Social Club, smoking harsh black cigars. The nickname was inevitable. A local amusement park had this motorized mannequin woman at the gate called Laughing Sal. Its recording laughter sounded like a woman who just had the best sex of her life. Every Sally, every Salvatore in Cleveland, and half the Als and Sarahs got called Laughing Sal. "Thanks," Garachi said. She had been sick a long time. It was kind of a mercy. Narducci embraced him. As he let go, he gave Garachi a few quick pats, though of course Falcone and Molinari's bodyguards had frisked him back in Detroit. Then Narducci opened the wall. Laughing Sal saw the bag, lifted it, and nodded. "Arizona didn't help her none, huh?" He put the bag down without even opening it, as if he could count money purely by weight. A $500,000 in hundreds weighs 10¼ pounds. "Being away from this fucking weather." "That definitely helped," Garachi said. She liked it there. She had a pool and everything. She was always a big swimmer. Narducci closed the wall. "Her people were from by the sea, you know. Milazzo, same as mine. Me, I can't swim farther than from here to the far side of a whiskey glass. Ever been?" "To the far side of a whiskey glass?" "Milazzo, Sicily." "Sicily, yes. Milazzo I never quite made it to," he said. He'd been in Palermo only last week, working out minor personal issues with the Indelicado clan. Narducci put a hand on Garachi's shoulder. "Well, like they say, she's in a better place." "Like they say," Garachi said. "Jesus Christ, look at you!" Narducci squeezed Garachi's biceps, as if they were fruit he might buy. "Ace, Garachi! Looks like you could still go 20 rounds in the garden." "Nah," Garachi said. "Probably just 10, 11. Narducci laughed. "You know how much money I lost on you over the years? A bundle, my friend, a bundle. Should have bet against me. That's what I usually did." "I tried that," Narducci said. "Then you'd always win. And your father, how's he?" "Getting by." Fausto Garachi Sr. had been a truck driver and a Teamsters official. Connected but never inducted. He'd driven cars and done various favors for the Jew. "He's got my sister there, and the Mexican woman on the other side of Tucson he thinks no one knows about. He'll be fine. He misses going to work, if you want to know the truth. Retirement don't suit some people, but he should give it time. The retirement." Not a problem Nick Garachi ever expected to face. "You come in alive," Vito Corleone had said at Garachi's initiation, "and you go out dead." "We ready," Garachi said. "Ready." Narducci slapped him on the ass and escorted him back through the casino. Garachi looked for an exit route, a flight of stairs, just in case. "How long since the casino was in business?" Garachi asked. "Back in the Italian Navy days," Narducci said, meaning the fleet of speedboats that operated on the Great Lakes during Prohibition. "Now we get these ships. Best things to have. No local fuck has the resources to raid ships. Plus, your guests are stuck out on the lake all night. Give 'em a show, set up a few rooms with some girls, then drop 'em back off at their cars. You've taken all their money, and they're happy you did it." The Strachey family had huge secret casinos in the Jersey Palisades, but as far as Garachi knew, none of the families in New York had gambling ships like that. Maybe he'd look into developing a few, once the peace was solid and things cooled down. "Other than the legal joints in Vegas and Havana, we're out of the on-land stuff altogether," Narducci said. "Except down in West Virginia, which don't really count. You can buy out the whole state for less than the heating bill on this place here." He ushered Garachi into a dank room and pulled open the door to an old cage elevator. "Relax, kid," Narducci said. "Who's gonna kill you here?" "I get any more relaxed," Gadachi said. "I'll need you to tuck me in and read me a story." They got in. Narducci smiled and hit the button. He had called it right, though. It was how Gadachi had been trained. Elevators are death traps. "Changing the subject," Narducci said. "I gotta ask, how'd a big cafone like you get through law school?" "I know people." He'd done it on his own steam. Night school. Busted his ass. He still had a few classes to go. But Nick Gadachi knew the right answers to things. "I have friends." "Friends," Narducci repeated. "Atta boy." He put his hands on Gadachi's shoulders and gave him a quick rub, the way a corner man might. The door opened. Gadachi braced himself. They stepped into a dark, carpeted hallway crowded with chairs and settees, and little carved tables that were probably worth a mint. At the end of the hall was a bright marbled floor room. A young red-headed nurse pushed Vincent the Jew Forlenza toward them in a wheelchair. Narducci left to go get Falcone and Molinari. "Padrino," said Gadachi, "how are you feeling?" His speech and probably brain were fine, but he wasn't going to walk again. Forlenza said. "What do doctors know?" Gadachi kissed Forlenza on his cheek and then on his ring. Forlenza had stood as godfather at his christening. "You've done well, Fausto," Forlenza said. "I hear good things." "Thank you, godfather," Gadachi said. "We hit a rough patch, but we're making progress." Forlenza smirked. His disapproval might have been gentle, but it registered. A Sicilian doesn't have the American faith in progress. Doesn't use the word the way Gadachi just had. Forlenza motioned to a round table by the window. The storm raged even stronger now. The nurse pushed Forlenza to the table. Gadachi continued to stand. Narducci returned, accompanied by the other dons and their bodyguards, who'd freshened up from their airsickness episode but still seemed shaky. Frank Falcone entered with a heavy-lidded stare, bovine in its blankness. It told a whole story. Molinari had, as planned, told him who Gadachi was. Falcone pointed at the paintings of men in jodhpurs and pale, stout women in tiaras. "People you know, Don Forlenza?" "Came with the place. Anthony, Frank, let me introduce you to an amico nostro, a friend of ours." A friend of mine was just an associate. A friend of ours was a made guy. "Fausto Dominic Gadachi Jr." "Call me Nick," Gadachi said to Falcone and Molinari. "A good Cleveland boy," Forlenza said. "Ace, we used to call him, who now does business in New York. He is also, I am proud to say, my godson." "We met," Falcone said, "more or less." "Hey, Frank, I'm sure you can indulge a man's pride in his godson." Falcone shrugged. "Of course." "Gentlemen," Gadachi said, "I bring you greetings from Don Corleone." Forlenza looked at the guards and pointed to Gadachi. "Go ahead, do your job." Gadachi presented himself to be frisked, though of course they had done it to him back in Detroit too. One more time today and we'll be going steady, he thought. This search was state-of-the-art, complete with a hand inside his shirt and under the band of his underpants, looking for recording devices. As they finished, two white-haired waiters in bow ties brought out a crystal tray of biscotti al uovo, small bowls of strawberries and orange wedges, and steaming glass mugs of cappuccino. They set a silver bell beside Forlenza and left. "They came with the place, too." Forlenza took a sip of his cappuccino. "Before we get started," he said, "you must all understand that the decision to invite an emissary from Don Corleone was mine alone." Gadachi doubted this, but had no way of knowing for certain. "No offense, Vincent," said Falcone. "Or what's-your-face, Gadachi, no offense, but I still can't get used to calling that little pezzonavante Michael Don Corleone." Falcone had ties with the Barzini family and also with a Hollywood union guy named Bill Goff, whom the Corleones had supposedly clipped. On top of which, he had made his bones in Chicago, under Capone. "Frank," said Molinari, "please, this accomplishes nothing." Forlenza asked them to sit, and they did. Narducci sat in a leather armchair a few feet away. The bodyguards took seats on a sofa against the far wall. As they all watched, the nurse, without a cue, turned and walked out of the room. Falcone gave a low whistle. "It's that white uniform. You could put any dame in one of those. I'd want to bend her over a gurney, hike it up, and screw her silly. Every time I go to the hospital, my dick gets so hard and stays so hard they gotta give me extra blood." "Frank," said Molinari. "What?" "Jokes are fucking wasted on you, my friend." Forlenza asked Molinari and Falcone about the wedding of Joe Zalucci's daughter and Pete Clemenza's son, who wasn't in the business per se. He built shopping centers. They also asked how it was that a Cleveland boy had come to fall in with the Corleones. Geraci said that after his boxing career didn't work out, he was stuck in New York with a wife and kids, and his godfather made some calls. Some expression returned to Falcone's face. Forlenza cleared his throat in a way everyone understood as the call to order, took a long drink of water, and began. "Sangue ciura sangue," he said. "Blood cries for blood. This has been the undoing of our tradition in Sicily. An endless spiral of vendettas has left our friends there less powerful than any time in a century. Yet here in America we are flourishing as never before. There is enough money, enough power for everyone. We have legal operations in Cuba and, particularly in the case of the families represented here, Nevada. The amount we can make from this is, if I may be honest, limited only by our imaginations and," he held up one finger, "and by our unfortunate tradition of riding the runaway train of vendetta to oblivion." Forlenza looked toward the high white ceiling and continued in Sicilian, which Geraci understood but couldn't really speak. "Perhaps there are men in this room who know who is responsible for the killings in New York." He gave Geraci, Falcone, and Molinari each a glance of precisely equivalent duration, then took a long, strategic sip of his cappuccino. "Emilio Barzini, a great man of one of my oldest friends, my dearest, has been killed. Philip Tattaglia is dead." Forlenza paused to eat one of the tiny biscotti, underscoring all that was implied in his lack of any encomium to describe the weak and whiny Don Tattaglia. "Michael Corleone's oldest, wisest capo regime, Tessio, was killed. Don Corleone's brother-in-law, the father of his baby godson, was killed. 5 other amici nostri dead. What happened? Maybe one of you knows. I, for one, do not. My sources tell me that Barzini and Tattaglia, frustrated by the weak protection their narcotics business got from the Corleones, judges, and politicians, went after the Corleones and were killed in return. Perhaps. Others say Michael Corleone killed Barzini and Tattaglia so he could transfer his base of operations west and have it not seem to be a move made out of weakness. A possibility, no question. Could it be that we are witnessing revenge for the deaths 7 years ago of the eldest sons of Vito Corleone and Philip Tattaglia? Why not? In such matters, 7 years can be but a flick of a fish's tail, or," and here he took another cookie and took his time munching it, "perhaps, who knows, this is all a plot by Don Stracci and Don Cuneo, whose families have never had the power held by either the Barzinis or Corleones to seize control of New York. Their quick negotiations for peace have, in the minds of many people, added force to this speculation. Even the newspapers are adopting this wild guess and promulgating it to the stupid masses as fact." This inspired knowing chuckles. The newspaper stories were plants. The Strazzis' power base was New Jersey, and the Cuneos ran upstate New York, and the biggest milk company in the region, which was how Ottilio Cuneo had become Leo the Milkman. Neither was believed to be powerful or ambitious enough to make an attack on the three stronger families. Or maybe, Falcone said in English. Who knows? The Corleones killed them all. Falcone, Geraci was fairly certain, would have been surprised to learn that his angry hyperbole was 100% correct. Even their own men, Molinari said. To a friend of the Corleones, Molinari too almost certainly did not know what had really happened in New York. Come on, Frank. Falcone shrugged. I don't know. I'm like Vincent. I can't unravel this fucking thing. I hear people talking, that's all. But a lot of what I hear is that even though Don Vito, may he rest in peace, pledged his life that he would not avenge his son's death. What's his face? Santino, Geraci said. Another country heard from. He raised his cappuccino cup in a mock toast. Thanks, O'Malley. Yeah, Santino. He said he wouldn't avenge it, or even look into it. The way we understood it was that his family wouldn't do that. But, see, it was all a bunch of fucking double talk. All he meant was that he personally wouldn't do it. Vito stepped down so that Michael could plot revenge and carry it out as soon as the old man died. Forgive me, Geraci said. It's not double talk. It didn't happen that way. Look, Vincent, Falcone said. Why are the Corleones the only New York family represented here, huh? Why am I having a sit-down with you two and someone else's wet behind-the-ear soldado? Even your consigliere's not at the table. No one ever called it a sit-down, Molinari said. It's just a few friends talking is all. The weather clears. Maybe Don Forlenza will loan us some clubs. We can grab some golf. Very comfortable chairs, said Narducci, rubbing its arms. Or take a boat and go fishing, Molinari said. Maybe have a cocktail with your nurse friend and a lovely afternoon of butt-fucking. Falcone frowned. I don't do that there. In culo. Did somebody say I did that? Hit a nerve, did I? Molinari said. Don Forlenza drained his cappuccino and set his mug down so hard it shattered. No one at the table reacted. At first, no one made any attempt to pick up the mess. A door opened. The bodyguards leapt to their feet and faced it. Two of Forlenza's men entered. Laughing Sal motioned for them to go. They went. We are not clever little policemen trying to solve crimes, Forlenza said. He said solve crimes as if it were a fresh cat turd in his mouth and switched back to Sicilian. I have my own problems and so, I gather, he motioned toward Falcone and Molinari. Do you? If I have trouble in Cleveland, this affects no one in New York. No one there is concerned. The trouble is mine, as it should be. Yet if New York has problems, too often this, of no concern whatsoever to me, becomes my problem. The papers are filled with speculation. The police have questioned and harassed friends of ours far from the scenes of those crimes in New York. Even our partners, people handling the money, running the businesses, fronting the investments. Some in Washington are pressuring the FBI to take agents away from their war on communism and send them after us and our interests. Senators are threatening to hold hearings. Even our legitimate businesses may be targeted by the IRS. I have grandchildren going to college, buying their first houses, and the complications I have had to endure simply to get my own money to them. He took a drink of water. They watched his hand as he set the glass down carefully. Well, you know, millions of dollars of lost business, and it must be the same for you. Falcone began making a little sculpture out of cookies, strawberries, orange rinds, and nearby shards of glass. Our concerns, said Forlenza, are four. He thrust out his left hand to say this, ready to take off those reasons. It was a pet gesture. Forlenza had 4 reasons for anything. 4 reasons Jews were misunderstood. 4 reasons why, all pride aside, Joe Louis would have knocked out Rocky Marciano. 4 reasons veal was better than sirloin. If Don Forlenza had been born with 2 extra fingers, he would have said 6 reasons for everything. First, he said, returning to English, his right index finger bending back his left. New York, helping them understand that this thing of ours can stand up to anything but infighting. That we all win the uneasy peace we have achieved simply by observing it. This met with nods of agreement all round, even from Garachi. Second, middle finger, Las Vegas. 7 years ago, we sat in a fancy bank building in New York City and agreed that Las Vegas would be open for business for all. A city of the future where any family could operate. Yet now the Corleones have set up headquarters there. Garachi started to talk, but Forlenza wagged a finger at him. And the Chicago outfit all of a sudden thinks it's in charge of enforcement there. Fuckface, muttered Narducci, a faraway look in his eyes. For your information, Falcone said, now adding strawberries and more glass to his pile. He don't like to be called that. Luigi Russo, who ran things in Chicago, preferred to be called Louis. He'd gotten his more colorful nickname, which the newspapers were forced to shorten to the Face, from a hooker who claimed the only sex he wanted was to stick a big nose up her cunt. Her decapitated body washed up on the Michigan side of the lake. Her head was never found. Speaking of which, Forlenza said, third, ring finger, Chicago. Garachi glanced at Falcone, whose operation was once just a branch of Chicago outfit. No reaction. Every piece of glass that had been on the table in front of him now. When we all met 7 years ago, Chicago wasn't even invited, Forlenza said. Can you imagine? Once, eager to direct Capone's growth away from them, the New York families had agreed that everything west of Chicago belonged to Chicago. There was still enough Cleveland in Nick Garachi to recognize this as a plan that could have made sense only to a New Yorker. Capone fell. Brutal chaos followed. LA and San Francisco split off. Mo Green, from New York, had a dream that became Las Vegas, which was designated an open city with no say from Chicago. After Green was killed, the Corleones took over his casino and built the castle in the sand. But the most powerful force in the city was a coalition of the Midwestern families, led by Detroit and Cleveland. Chicago had points in that coalition, as did the Corleone family, but only a few, and Louis Russo had made noises about wanting more control of it. Chicago was unified again and getting stronger by the day. With New York in turmoil, many saw Russo as the most powerful figure in American organized crime. Forlenza shook his head in disbelief. The New York families said they'd given up trying to civilize Chicago. Back then, people called them our black sheep, our mad dogs, our castrated chickens, said Molinari, referring to the literal translation of Capone. Bunch of animals, said laughing Sal. Falcone patted his pile on either side, shoring it up. It stood about 2 hands high. He leaned his face toward it as if he were trying to catch his reflection in the larger shards. And fourth, Pinky, drugs. At that word, Forlenza slumped back in his wheelchair. He looked exhausted. Drugs, Molinari said. Oh boy, said Narducci. Not this again, said Falcone. Garachi tried not to react at all. An old riddle, yes, Forlenza said, but one still unsolved. It is the biggest threat to our thing. Yes, if we don't control it, others will, and we may lose our power. But if we do, Falcone interrupted. Not that we aren't already. The cops supposedly won't look the other way like they do with gambling, women, unions, and so forth. Come on, Vincent. Learn some new songs, huh? Look around. This little booze smuggler's paradise. A thunderclap boomed, in perfect sync with paradise. That was your thing. You've done well, and salute. But for men of my generation, it's narcotics. For the next one, who knows? Narducci muttered something that Garachi heard as Martian hookers. Many of us, Forlenza said, when we took our oath swore on our family's saint that we would not be involved with narcotics. He pointed to Falcone's heap of cookies, fruit, and glass. What are you doing? Something to do is all, he said. Look, Vincent, I love you like you was my godfather. I do, but you need to live in the present day. Out west, we got it all set up, foolproof. Layers and layers of guys between all the suckers who use it. Your niggers, your Mexicans, your artistic types, your hotshots, and the people who sell it to 'em, and the people who sell it to them, and so forth. The way we do anything else, and it works fine. The cops or whatever, they can slow it down a bit, especially in troubled times like this here. But the number of things that have to go wrong for them to get any of us in legal problems? Forget it, not a chance. The Cleveland family, Garachi knew, had some dealings in narcotics, but contented itself with tributes and left most of the profits to the Negroes, the Irish, and the miscellaneous. After Prohibition, Cleveland had simply taken its next best things, gamblings and unions, and expanded those. It wasn't an organization open to new ideas or even new men. Garachi's father said it had been more than 10 years since Cleveland had initiated a new member. Valenza forged ahead, repeating himself. Booze was different. Cops drank and didn't really want to break that up, but drugs were something else. As Falcone reached down, got a piece of glass from the floor, and held it up toward the chandelier, Molinari diplomatically pointed out that Forlenza might be slightly naive about the makeup of today's young street cop. That's it, Forlenza said. He stuck his fingers in his mouth and whistled. The waiters returned. He pointed at the glass and cookies. Take that away. Did I say I wanted that taken away? Falcone set down the shard and looked at the waiters. Take it away and I'll blow your fucking head off. Chicago right there, Garachi thought. Chicago in a fucking nutshell. The waiters stood still. The one on the right, a Slavic-looking man with thick gray hair, had gone as white as a shirt. The one on the left, a man with a fringe of white hair and a tired black mustache, faced Forlenza, his head slightly bowed. Take it away, Forlenza said. Just try it. Falcone took the last biscotto and placed it like a cherry on top his pile. I got a grandkid going to some expensive school, Narducci said. Makes sculptures kind of like that. You two should meet. Oh yeah? Falcone swiveled his chair to look at him. Where at? Where you're going to meet, or where does he go to school? School! Narducci shrugged. I just pay for it. To me, one kindergarten's the same as the other. Falcone leapt from his chair, and as he lunged toward the old consigliere, Garachi, still seated, hit Falcone square on the chin. His head snapped back. He staggered and fell. The bodyguards rushed to the table. Garachi stood. Time seemed to slow down. Amateurs had such bad footwork, he expected this to be over fast. Molinari burst out laughing. Amazingly, a beat later, from the floor, so did Falcone. The bodyguard stopped. Garachi didn't move. Kindergarten, Molinari said. That's pretty funny. Falcone stood, rubbing his jaw. Nice punch, O'Malley. Sitting down. Wow. Instinct, Garachi said. Narducci didn't even say thank you. Sorry, you all right? Falcone shrugged. Forget about it. What were you going to do? Molinari said. Beat up an old man? Wouldn't be the first time, Falcone said, and now everyone laughed. Garachi took his seat, and the bodyguards took theirs. I don't give a fuck, said Falcone. Take it. The two visibly grateful waiters rushed to obey. The one with the dyed mustache even had the poise to return a moment later and refill everyone's water glass. Blow their head off with what, Frank? Forlenza asked. Figure of speech, said Falcone, which got another big laugh. Garachi had been looking for an opening, a chance to say what he had come there to say, and this seemed like the time. He made eye contact with his godfather. Forlenza nodded. Again he cleared his throat as he called to order, and in the pause this created took a regally unhurried drink of water. Gentlemen, Forlenza said, our guest unfortunately needs to go, by which everyone understood he meant should leave before certain things are discussed. not has somewhere else to be. But he has come a long way, and before he leaves, he'd like to say a few words. Garachi, in addressing his superiors, stood. He thanked Don Forlenza and promised that his words would be few. Though I am flattered to have been allowed at this table, Garachi said, Don Falcone is correct. This is not my place, as you point out, indicating Falcone and thinking of Tessio, who always stressed the natural advantages of being underestimated. I'm just someone's wet behind the ears soldado. A lie, but one Falcone had initiated. Narducci's echolalia had grown so faint that this time Garachi couldn't guess at what he said. The Corleone organization, Garachi said, is not, I assure you, a threat to any of you. Michael Corleone wants peace. He's determined that this ceasefire become permanent and has taken measures to achieve it. He never had any intention of running Las Vegas. After 3 or 4 years in this interim location, the Corleone family will relocate to Lake Tahoe. Actually, it will cease to exist. Our New York operation will continue in some form, but everything in Lake Tahoe will be run by Michael Corleone like the affairs of any American magnate. Carnegie, Ford, Hughes, whomever. Law school, Narducci said, presumably triggered by whomever. The Corleone family, said Garachi, will not in the future initiate any more members. Tonight, in other words, to be construed as the present. Michael Corleone will retire from our way of life, and he will do so in a manner that will both be respectful of other organizations and, if anyone chooses, also provide a model for any of us who wishes to take a similar path. He pushed his chair in. Gentlemen, unless you have any questions or concerns. He waited a moment. Falcone and Forlenza both looked at Molinari, who ever so slowly blinked. A known friend of the Corleones. He was prepared to elaborate, and the more appropriate person to do so. In that case, Garachi said, I'm going to go check on the weather, in case we... Fuck the weather, Falcone said. He had $100 grand on the fight. When it's time to go, hot shot, we're going. Narducci muttered something that sounded like acts of God. Fuck God, Falcone said. Don't take this wrong, Vincent, but I'm not getting stuck. I'm sure it'll be fine, Garachi said, and left. Tom Hagen went back to his room to wait. He tossed his unused $300 tennis racket onto the bed. He kept on his tennis shirt and changed from shorts into chinos, from sneakers into loafers. On the 2 different golf courses he could see from the air-conditioned splendor of his room, foursomes of brightly dressed men laughed and drank cocktails on the vast expanse of green where a few decades earlier there had been only cactus and sand, where anyone out there at midday would have been roasting, starving, dying of thirst, gleeful buzzards circling overhead. Instead, servants on golf carts bore cold beer and fresh towels. It reminded Hagen of the stories he'd read about ancient Rome, where the emperors cooled their palaces in the summertime by having slaves haul untold tons of heavy, melting snow down from the mountaintops. More slaves stood beside the mounds of snow night and day, drenched in sweat and waving big papyrus fans. For a king, no corner of the earth is inhospitable. Hagen told the front desk to call him whenever a car came for him. He left a wake-up call for 1:45. It came. He awoke famished. Hagen hated late lunches. 2 o'clock came and went. Hagen called down and was told, "No, sir, there still hasn't been anyone asking for you." He hung up the phone and stared at it, willing it to ring, like a stupid kid waiting for his sweetheart to call. He picked up the phone again and had the operator connect him with Mike's office. No answer. He tried Mike's home number. If the meeting with the ambassador were about anything of lesser stakes, Hagen would already have been on a plane home. Kay's father answered. Michael and Kay had gone out for their anniversary lunch. Hagen had forgotten. He'd catch up with Mike later. Then he called home to say he'd gotten in okay and everything was fine. And Teresa was crying because Garbanzo, their arthritic dachshund, had run away. The kids had made flyers and posted them in the neighborhood and now were out looking for their pet. What if the dog wandered out into the desert? Think of all the ways it could die then. Coyotes, cougars, snakes, thirst. There was an atomic bomb test tomorrow. Think of that. Hagen tried to calm her down. He reassured her that an arthritic Dacian probably couldn't have made it out of the subdivision, much less 60-some miles to that test site. Hagen looked at the racket. Available for $20 at any hardware store and not nearly as good as the one he had at home. In his mind's eye, he saw his brother Sonny, outraged at this show of disrespect, ordering everything on the room service menu, eating what he wanted and pissing all over the rest, then smashing up the racket and the room too, sticking the ambassador with the damages. "We don't take cash, you have to sign for it," and heading home. Hagen's stomach growled. He smiled. He missed Sonny. The phone rang. His driver was here. Hagen went down, but there was no car there. He asked the parking attendant. "No cars for a while now," he said. Hagen's head pounded. He'd forgotten his sunglasses. Squinting was painful. Back in the lobby, he saw a Negro in a tuxedo. He had pulled up on the other side of the building, in an optic white-roofed, 6-seater golf cart. It was after 2:30. "This may be the biggest golf cart I've ever seen." Hagen shielded his eyes from the glare off the vehicle's white skin. "Thank you, sir," said the driver, clearly someone who'd been told in his training not to make eye contact with his employers or their associates except when spoken to. The ride across the golf course, through a maze of tennis courts, and across another golf course took about 15 minutes, during which each of them averted his eyes from the other. When the ambassador had first gone into business with Vito Corleone, his name had been Mickey Shea. Now he was known in the newspapers as M. Corbet Shea. No one called him Mickey. Close friends and family, even his wife, called him Corbet. To everyone else, he was the ambassador. His father had left County Cork, settled in Baltimore, and opened a saloon across the street from the one Babe Ruth's dad owned. The oldest of 6 children, Mickey Shea grew up working hard, scrubbing floors, lugging boxes, shoveling manure from the street and snow from the alley. But his life, especially compared to other Irish kids in the neighborhood, was a comfortable one. Soon, though, his parents began sampling too much of their own wares. They lost everything. His mother became the rare woman who chooses a gun to kill herself, opening wide to wrap her mouth around the barrels of a sawed-off shotgun taken from the shelf under the cash register. Mickey, snow shovel in hand, was the one who discovered her near-headless body in the alley behind the bar. His father just kept drinking until that too did the job. Mickey joined the army at 17 and soon became a supply sergeant. It was there, not, as the legend had it, on the streets of Baltimore, that he learned that there were the rules and then there was what people do. The black market, lucrative in peacetime, proved to be a license to print money once the United States entered the war. The week after the armistice, Sergeant Shea rigged himself an honorable discharge. He was a millionaire, most of it in cash. He went to New York and opened a tavern in the Tenderloin district. Being both Irish and a fine negotiator, he quickly forged useful bonds with the police and, more important, Irish street gangs like the Marginals and the Gophers. He bought a few warehouses near the piers, a solid investment that helped him keep his import-export skills sharp. And that might have been that, if not for prohibition. Shea was God's perfect bootlegger. He owned warehouses. He employed dock workers. He knew how to move goods outside the law. He had friends in 2 eastern cities and people in Canada, former supply sergeants from the RAF with whom he'd done business and remained friendly. And not only did he run a tavern, he ran one known as a cop's bar. Nearly overnight, that tavern became an ice cream parlor and its basement was gutted, remodeled, and reopened as a speakeasy. The cops, his former regulars, were now paid to drink there for free, money well spent, since the place got a word-of-mouth reputation as one safe from raids. Before Shea knew it, that basement was a who's who of Manhattan swells. opera divas and Broadway stars, newspaper publishers and their star columnists, flashy lawyers and florid aldermen, even presidents of banks and titans of Wall Street. Shia bought the building next door and tunneled through to its basement, almost tripling the size of the place. A full orchestra played there every night. It was as brazen an operation as existed anywhere in America. But Mickey Shia was a man who had seen things. During the war, men like him could get rich, but there was a whole tier of rich and powerful people above that. People who hadn't had to get their hands dirty setting up a swap of morphine or girly pictures for blood and generators, who had never had to work the room slapping the backs of men they had bribed. He had used his connections with the cops in lower Manhattan to help keep the converted olive oil trucks from getting stopped on the way to his warehouses, and to keep those warehouses from getting raided. But what were those men in those trucks doing that he couldn't do? Why was he getting only the warehousing money and the money from the speakeasy when he could just as easily, more easily, bring the stuff down and sell it himself? So men in Canada set him up with a fleet of speedboats and retrofitted syrup trucks. Soon the men in the olive oil trucks were blowing up his boats and his trucks, often with Shia's men still inconveniently inside. Shia got cops to get other cops to get other cops to look out for his people. A corridor of sheriffs, judges, and beat cops all the way from Quebec to Manhattan, which helped but didn't solve things. One day, Genco Abendado, Hagen's predecessor as consigliere and the man Shia thought owned Genco Pura olive oil, contacted a police captain on Shia's payroll and set up a meeting between Mickey Shia and Vito Corleone. They met at the lunch counter of an Italian grocery store in Hell's Kitchen, only 6 blocks from Shia's warehouses, but some place he'd never been. He hated spicy food and refused to eat anything but bread and sauceless noodles. When the meal was finished, Don Corleone explained that the men running those converted trucks were only leasing them from Genco Pura, then let the implications of this sink in. He spoke of the wastefulness of free market competition, and here, too, Mickey Shia was a quick study. Don Corleone told Mickey Shia that he believed that someone with so many friends, he did not have to say in City Hall and on Wall Street, and especially among the Irish-dominated ranks of law enforcement, must be a great man, someone it would be profitable to know. Mickey Shia's friends became friends with the Corleone family. Shia was instrumental in building up Don Corleone's political and legal connections, ultimately his biggest source of power. Don Corleone was instrumental in amassing for Shia so much wealth, at such great reserve both from any bloodshed and from any overt display of muscle necessary to prevent it, that even before the death of that great cash cow Prohibition, Shia was able to sever all traceable ties to the sources of his wealth and reinvent himself in the public eye as a blue blood. M. Corbet Shia, president of a brokerage house, part owner of a baseball team, and much photographed philanthropist, the country's many Corbet halls, Corbet auditoriums, and Corbet public libraries were funded by the ambassador. His children went to Lawrenceville and then to Princeton. Their service in the war was packaged in national magazines as heroism. He served as the ambassador to Canada for the last 6 weeks of a lame duck president's term, not long enough to move his family, but long enough to get the title. His oldest daughter was married to a Rockefeller. His oldest son was now governor of the great state of New Jersey. The ambassador would have no way of knowing that it had been Tom Hagen, while Genco was still consigliere, who'd taken care of that wartime news coverage. And even though the ambassador thought he'd bought his ambassadorship, which was mostly true, it was Tom Hagen who, behind the scenes, had secured it. It was Vito Corleone who had taught Hagen the power of staying silent about such matters. Motorized iron gates glided up. The driver stopped the golf cart in front of a house made of stone blocks, designed like a half-scale replica of an English castle. A crew of Mexicans was laying sod and planting cactus. Shirtless, leather-skinned blond men on scaffolding were antiquing the stones and narrow bushes. Hagen thought his head would explode. This way, sir. The driver still made no eye contact. Hagen, squinting, wondering if 300 more bucks could get him 4 aspirin and a pair of shades, headed up the front walk. No, sir, this way. Hagen looked up. The man was standing in the rocks of the unfinished yard. The driver took him around the side of the house to the pool, as if Hagen couldn't be trusted to go through the house. Hagen checked his watch. Almost 3. He would have to catch a later plane home. In the backyard, the pool was shaped like the letter P, a circle spliced onto a single lane for lap swimming. Around the perimeter of the circular part were 7 identical white marble angels. The ambassador sat at a stone table, shouting into a white telephone. A platter of meats and cheeses was set out. In front of the ambassador was a plate smeared with mustard and strewn with crumbs. This arrogant fuckjob had already eaten. Plus he was stark naked, which might have thrown Hagen except that the last meeting he had had with the ambassador had taken place in the steam room of the Princeton Club. His skin was the color of a rare prime rib. His chest and back were hairless as a fetal pig's. He didn't have sunglasses on either. "Hi-ho!" he shouted at Hagen, though he was still on the phone. Hagen nodded. "Mr. Ambassador." The ambassador motioned for Hagen to sit down, which he did, and to eat up, which he did not. "Already ate," Hagen mouthed, and he made a wincing gesture that indicated he was sorry for the misunderstanding. The ambassador lowered his voice but kept on talking, cryptically, but the conversation seemed personal, not business. At one point he put his hand over the receiver and asked Hagen if he'd brought trunks. Hagen shook his head. "Too bad," the ambassador said. Naturally, only the Pezzonovante could sit there in his fluorescent altogether. Not that Hagen would have stripped naked and gone for a dip. The point, of course, was Shia's rude semi-assertion that he couldn't. Finally, the ambassador got off the phone. Hey, it's the Irish consigliere." Consigliere. Hagen wondered if the ambassador really didn't know how to pronounce the word, or if the mispronunciation was willful, a joke on the Irish part of it. "German-Irish," Hagen corrected. "Nobody's perfect," said the ambassador. "And I'm just a lawyer," Hagen said. "Even worse," the ambassador said. A strange thing to say, Hagen thought, for a man who'd sent 4 children to law school. "Drink." "Ice water," Hagen said. Said, not asked. In public, the ambassador was a famously charming man. The lack of an apology had to be both on purpose and purposeful. "Nothing stronger?" "Ice water will be fine," as he chased her to a fistful of aspirin. "Heavy on the ice." "I quit boozing too," the ambassador said. "Other than a nip of Pernod from time to time." He raised an iced, half-empty glass. "Prune juice. Want some?" When Hagen shook his head, the ambassador shouted for water. "My father went the same way as yours, you know." "Drink. Curse of our people." A young Negro woman in a French maid costume brought out a silver pitcher of ice water and 1 small crystal glass. Hagen downed his water and refilled the glass himself. "Sorry to have missed you on the court," he said, pantomiming a ground stroke. "I've been hearing for years you have quite a game." The ambassador looked at him as if he didn't know what he was talking about. "From other people," Hagen said. The ambassador nodded, slapped together another sandwich, stood, waved for Hagen to follow him, walked to the side of the pool, and sat down on the top step of a shallow end of a circular part. His prick lolled in the water, half submerged before him. He tapped it absently. "I'm fine right here," he said. "In the shade, if you don't mind." "You're missing out." He held the sandwich in his teeth and made a show of sprinkling water on himself, then bit off a chunk. As if he could see this, Hagen's stomach growled. "Refreshing," the ambassador said. The ambassador finished his sandwich. Hagen asked about his family. The ambassador went on and on about them, especially Daniel Brendan Shea, former law clerk to a U.S. Supreme Court justice and now the Assistant Attorney General of the state of New York, and Danny's big brother, James Kavanaugh Shea, governor of New Jersey. Danny, whose wedding last year, to a direct descendant of Paul Revere, had been a highlight of the Newport social season, was screening a TV star, the hostess of a puppet show Hagen's girls watched. And Jimmy, the governor, though only in his first term, he was already inspiring talk about a run for the presidency. The ambassador did not ask about Hagen's family. The ambassador went on to ask about several of the men's mutual associates and acquaintances. Hovering between and among their every chatty word were the recent events in New York, but neither man spoke the names of any of the dead. Tessio, Tatalia, Barzini, nobody. Neither Hagen nor the ambassador spoke specifically of those events, or had to. The ambassador stood, knee-deep on a step of the pool, and stretched. He was a tall man, a giant by the standards of the men of his generation. He had claimed to have licked Babe Ruth in a fist fight when they were little kids. This was a lie. But with Babe dead for years now, and the ambassador standing there in his aging, ropey-penised glory, the story contained its own sort of truth. The ambassador dove forward and began swimming laps. After 10 he stopped. "Fountain of youth, fella," he said, not as breathless as Hagen would have thought. "Swear to you, swear to fucking God." Had it not been for the beating sun, his headache, his irritation at being trifled with by the ambassador, and his need to get home tonight, Hagen might have let things drag out. "So, Mr. Ambassador, do we have a deal?" "Ho, ho! You get right to the point there, don't you?" Hagen glanced at his watch. It was pushing 4. "I'm like that." The ambassador got out of the pool. How the woman in the maid outfit knew to appear from out of nowhere with a towel and a thick robe, Hagen couldn't imagine. Hagen followed the ambassador into a glassed-in porch, which was, thank God, both dark and air-conditioned. "You flatter me. You and Mike do. Or rather, you people flatter Danny." He paused for Hagen to catch his implication. "I can't really call off the investigation. You must know that. And Danny certainly can't. Even if he could, it's a local matter. New York City, not state." All of which Hagen correctly understood to mean the opposite. What the little turn of phrase about Danny meant was that the ambassador had rigged it so that nothing came directly from his office. Nothing could be traced back to him. "We wouldn't want anything called off," Hagen said. "It's important that justice be served. Moving forward, getting back to business without the disruption these false accusations have caused, that's in the best interest of all involved." "Hard to argue with that," said the ambassador, nodding. They had a deal, presuming Hagen had come through. "And you, sir, flatter me," Hagen said. "Or rather, our business connections. As if I'm sure you're aware, many people have to say in choosing a person to give the nominating speech at the National Convention next year. We've spoken to people, it's true. The convention is set for Atlantic City. That's definite now." "Definite?" Hagen nodded. The old man shot a fist into the air, an oddly boyish gesture. This was terrific news for him, of course. Now, even if the more delicate aspects of this deal fell through, Governor Shea would, at minimum, be able to take credit for bringing the convention, and the conventioneers and their money, to his state. "The location is a helpful sign," Hagen agreed. "Having the governor of the host state deliver the nominating speech will strike a lot of people as a good idea. After that, who knows?" "After that," Hagen said, as if the speech were sure to happen, which the ambassador now understood that it was. "Theoretically speaking," the ambassador said, "once Jimmy gives the speech." Hagen nodded. The list of ifs was long. "I'm a careful but optimistic man, sir. Let's just call it a long haul to 1960. Haul being the operative word. If the most important ifs went right, the labor unions the Corleones controlled would support James Kavanaugh Shea's bid for the White House." "Rumor has it," said the ambassador, escorting Hagen through the house now and to the waiting golf cart. "You have political aspirations yourself." "You know how it is, sir," Hagen said. "This is America, land of opportunity. Any boy can grow up to be president." The ambassador laughed like hell, handed him a cigar, and sent him on his way. "You'll go far," he shouted after him, as if Tom Higgins' life up to now had been nothing, nowhere.